things which I do with with a lot of passion. So this is one such area I've been working on for the last 10, 15 years. So I thought I'll give you an overview of that. Yeah, so the lecture will deal with the water availability, freshwater availability, Indian wastewater scenario, why reuse wastewater. It's wastewater is wastewater, but why reuse? And environmental issues with wastewater in India, zero liquid discharge schemes in India and Tamil Nadu. Then I will use tanneries as an example because I have been very deeply involved in tanneries, for ZLD for tanneries. So I have a lot of information and data, real life data. So I will use that to show you. Then how do they manage uh, RO reject management, RO reject? How do they manage it? And what are the issues with the multiple effect evaporation in CETP and salt recovery, reuse, disposal, and challenges? So I hope that you are able to hear me properly. Yeah.
Loud
There
and
is,
clear, sir.
okay, okay. Thank you, thank you. Just wanted reassurance. I know water is a very important uh, commodity for our survival, ecosystems, industrial industries, and it is. You must understand water. I always say water is like energy, almost like it can neither be created nor be destroyed. Although you can say, oh, water can be formed during chemical reactions. It is, yes, it is true. Water can be formed in chemical reaction. Water also takes part in chemical reaction. But water by creation and consumption is negligible compared to the water around the globe. So you can, with a lot of certainty say water can neither be created nor be destroyed. And so if that is so, why are we facing scarcity? Yeah, this is the problem. Therefore, people are saying the world over there is a population is increasing and fresh water availability is still remaining same and we are polluting more. Therefore, the fresh water will be difficult to get in the next few decades. And then it becomes a crisis for the world. Uh, Major problem is man-made activities, and there are some issues with climate change. I'll show you that. I'll let you know. Yeah, this is the most common figure we show when you talk about water. See, you have water available, and in all these things, plenty of water is there. There is no shortage of water. Ocean is water, but unfortunately, you cannot drink most of the water available because they are saline and they are not fresh water. So either you have to make fresh water from ocean like desalination, which um, many places in Gujarat and Tamil Nadu they do. And I'm not going to talk about that because that is not wastewater. And then if you go further deeper and deeper, you will find ultimately only 2.5% of the water available in the water cycle is fresh water, potable. And then out of that only 0.3% is available for you, 0.78% of fresh drinking water is allowed. So that means we have huge quantity of water, but only 0.78% is available as fresh water for drinking. This is the irony. And if you look at water usage, agriculture uses 65% of the water, including fresh water, because they draw water from river. Then 25% for industry, only 10% for domestic use. That means we people, as a commoner, we use only 10%, and the industry uses only 25%, but agriculture uses 65%. And in a country like India, agriculture is politically sensitive. What they do is they get free electricity, therefore they don't worry about drawing water. And therefore they draw much more than required. And if you go by that, you will find that the water efficiency in agriculture sector is pretty poor. Therefore, water availability in India is, brewing. And this is what I meant by global water cycle. Water gets evaporated, goes to sky as a cloud, then it comes back as rain, and then runoff to the river. But the problem is, what climate change is saying is that this is not going to be affected. The total water available in the water cycle is almost the same. What happened hundreds of years ago, it remains the same. But the pattern of all these, recycling, the water getting evaporated, vapor transpiration, vapor cloud, and then precipitation, runoff. These quantities vary independently, but the total quantity remains the same. What IPCC was saying is that but now if the rain has a spread over 3 months, it can happen the same rain will come in 3 days. So intensity of rain can increase significantly and water precipitation almost remaining the same. That means you get in Bombay, and particularly Bombay, it has happened many times that annual rainfall has occurred in a day. So but the no drainage system can capture that water and drain it properly. So that means flooding will happen. If you go to few, and the airport was fully underwater. And this is happening all over the world. In New York happened only a few weeks ago. New York was underwater. Entire New York, the subways, everything was underwater. And that is because of the climate change. But one of the major drawbacks of that is, if you cannot capture freshwater precipitation and you allow it to go to sea, that means that fresh water which is available for you, we are not able to utilize it. So freshwater, due to climate change, is decreasing because of the downpour, and we are not able to. No system can capture so much of water. And so this is a global map of water availability. What does that mean, water availability and scarcity? So physical scarcity means, I have written here, more than 75% of river flow is withdrawn. For instance, India, we draw a lot of our water from rivers. So we are approaching physical scarcity. Physical water scarcity. Then over 70% flow withdrawn. Example, South Africa. 75% is physical water, then approaching. So that means you are drawing almost more than 60% of river flow. So you are approaching physical scarcity. Economic water scarcity is a very peculiar problem, particularly for African countries. They have water, but they draw only a small quantity of water, but their economics is not improved. So they are not able to use the water available for their economic development. So we call this economic water scarcity. Then we have no water scarcity, like Northern America, some parts of Australia. Central Australia, is very bad, not because there's nobody living in the central Australia. So you have no problem around the people are settled, most of the people are settled in this region and this region. All the industries are here and here. So it has no problem. Likewise, Brazil, Argentina, plenty of river water, there's no problem, you know. Whereas this, the central globe, Africa and Asia, we have a lot of problems with respect to water scarcity. Therefore, we should be concerned about water, and India is one of the worst affected, you know, except a few areas in central India. And what is environmental needs? In environmental engineering, one of my PhD students worked on environmental water needs. It says that river requires certain minimum amount of water for sustainability, ecosystem. If you don't provide that water, that means that river cannot sustain and it dies. I'll give you a very personal example. I was traveling from Madurai airport to Dindigul for to look at one ZLD project in Dindigul, and I saw a huge bridge. And I asked the driver, why is this huge bridge and on both sides you have only shrubs and trees? He said, sir, this is Vaigai. We are driving over the Vaigai and now there is no water, so there are shrubs in the entire river. See, that is the level of now water shortage. When there is, Vaigai was used to be in floods, but now Vaigai is with shrubs. So, you know, that is because we have not provided environmental water needs for rivers, and we have drawn. Now we have Palar is a classical example. You know, Palar has only. I'm talking about Tamil Nadu because I live in Tamil Nadu and I am familiar with Indian Tamil Nadu rivers. Palar is a classical example for environmental water. We drew a lot of water from Palar and polluted it, and now there is only undercurrent, you know, in the aquifer flow, and there is no surface water on the Palar river. All these things have caused a lot of water scarcity in river, and water, any water available is not potable or usable, and WHO has certain index definitions. One is drinking water quality, another is health water quality, third is agriculture water quality index. This is for drinking, and what are the limits, and then health with respect to health, and then with respect to agriculture use. And if you look at that, all these things, you will find that the dark red portions are bad quality, and blue, green are all good quality. And although we have seen the earlier plot, you will find that India has a very, very bad quality according to this map. So that means even water available has very poor rating. And our population is increasing. India has only 2.4% of world area, but 17% of population. That means we have to supply much more water than what we had 100 years ago. And as I said, we have certain quantity of 11 billion meter cube of water, groundwater resources, and per capita water availability is 1,720 meter cube. So, these usually all the scarcity is defined with respect to per capita water availability, and this is below the, the scarcity line. That means we are already on the water scarcity. And if you go for a building sanction to the government, the guy, I used to be chairman of Maharashtra committee, so I know this situation in Maharashtra, but not much in Tamil Nadu. So we used to ask, who is going to give you water? You know, that fellow might say, I'm a big builder, I will build, I have all the monies, but who is going to give you water? He has to show me, the committee, that he will have water either from corporation or drawn from nearby water body and he will treat it. So this is not easy because for every person he is building and there is a 135 LPCD, liter per capita per day. That means that much water should be available in a flat or in a dwelling. So if there are 5 people, you have to multiply it by that 5, you should have that much quantity available. And if there are 1,500 people in a condominium, so he has to show 1,500 into 135. You know, many times they may get 90. Where is he going to get 45 LPCV? So this is an issue now in most of the major cities. That is because we are building, population increasing, but the water is not available because we are not able to store runoff. That's where my talk becomes important. And what do you mean by wastewater? Industries use water for many purposes, including manufacturing. But then they could be using it for heating, in heat exchangers, cooling, as a solvent in cleaning, in textile, leather, as a carrier of raw material, carrier of waste matter. You know. And then in domestic, we have 2 types of water. One is called grey water. That is a wastewater from your shower, kitchen, washing, bathroom and all that, grey water. And that is not an issue because it may contain a little bit of bacteria, but not much of, microbial contamination or microorganisms or for disease causing microorganisms. Black water is what comes out of feces and urine in toilets and things like flush. And this is difficult to treat because it contains human waste and it could have a lot of disease causing bacteria, and therefore we need to be careful handling black water. So in most of the situation, we target grey water and treat black water and use it for some other purpose. I will come to that. Then you have to understand point source and non-point source of water pollution. Point source is something which comes in a big way, like industrial discharge. If it is getting even domestic sewage in Coam River is a point source. You know, in a big, they may be having a huge condo and then they just discharge the water into river, and that is a point source. And this can be targeted, whereas non-point source is difficult. For instance, runoff from rain, and it will just go into some surface water body, river or canal and things like that. So that is a non-point. It's a very diffused. It's not a major single point source of wastewater. So non-point source wastewater is an issue, and you have to do it in many countries. They do it very well. For instance, Singapore is a classical example of even harvesting non-point source and besides point source, because they capture every drop. Singapore doesn't have any fresh water, so they capture every drop of rainwater and use it for their drinking purpose. Whereas we are targeting wastewater because our water comes in a big way and we are not able to capture fresh water as much as we can. But rainwater harvesting is a must now. Most of the flats have that. But still, it's not a major capacity. What goes on the roads, we are not able to capture. It goes to the canals and rivers. So you have non-point source, domestic sewage and some small-scale industries are all non-point sources, and runoff from agriculture, all these things with the fertilizers, detergents, and particularly with the phosphates and the nitrogen, you have a eutrophication, so the river gets completely in a BOD goes and dissolved oxygen is almost DO is negligible, therefore it's not able to provide shelter for biodiversity, microorganisms and fish and things like that. And point sources, industrial discharge. Then thermal pollution. This we don't consider this in a major way, but now it has become a major issue. For instance, earlier we can let out with 5 degrees over the water intake. If I take water at 30 degrees Celsius, I can release up to 35 degrees Celsius as a cooling water. But now in some cases it has been reduced to 3 degrees Celsius in certain 3K. You can't, the difference between intake and outfall cannot be more than 3K. But earlier we can use it repeatedly, but in some cases now they are saying it's one pass through. That means you have to take huge quantity of water for thermal power stations. And that's why thermal power stations are located close to water body like sea, and it causes thermal pollution. That means discharge point, although it is between 3K and 5K Kelvin, but the society, the coastal community, they say they are losing livelihood because fish and other things don't come there and they go away from hotter zone. So this is an issue. So these are the, and I can tell you, when we talk about sustainability, we always say, prevention, like, health, prevention is better than cure. So always look for prevention of and elimination of waste generation. That should be your top priority. Disposal should be the last priority. You should minimize water consumption, you should minimize creation of waste, and that becomes the top priority, and disposal become. And then in between you should make all efforts to recycle. And in some places, source reduction gives you very great benefit because you are not producing waste and you are using less source, therefore you get money, you save money. But remediation is the most expensive part because you have to spend money to treat water, whereas you make effort through certain engineering innovation, you save money. And so now the effort is to both ways, avoid waste generation and recover water from waste. And why do we need wastewater treatment? Because if you treat water, even if you take water, you can, although you use the water from and use it in the commercial buildings, and but then you can, if you treat it properly, if you treat it properly, you will be able to reuse it. You can use it for parks, you can use it for recharging, you can use it for agriculture, and there are many uses of water. And you can use it for recycling in an industry, you can use it for air conditioning in commercial building. So water treated can be reused in many ways. So that way you can minimize the consumption of fresh water. So this is the definition which you find in like UN, WHO. Water reuse, treating and disinfecting wastewater, then reusing it. That is water reuse. For instance, although you'll be treating, but if you're going to reuse it in your own house, then you should do disinfect so that it doesn't carry back any bacteria. Reclamation is just remove, treat it, and but more with respect to heavy metals and bacteria, so that it can be reused. So we will talk about it. You know, you can use it for in industries. They use it for even air conditioning. Now, treated wastewater is used in air conditioning or fire protection or gardening. Even condos they use for gardening a lot. Now in my condo we use treated wastewater for gardening, and uh, and then water recycling. I will be talking quite a lot very soon. Uh, did we, are we really using, reusing water in India? Uh, yes, it is being done in many places. It started quite some time in Bombay. Now it has percolated to all parts of India. In certain parts, it's compulsory to reclaim and reuse water because they think that they cannot give you uh, enough water in the future. And water quality also is deteriorating, so therefore, even for water treatment, we have to spend more money and effort to supply water. It started very early, in Bombay. They started using it in agriculture, but in a very unhealthy way. If you go to Bombay, after, I would say Kalyan, you will find entire stretch of wastewater canals with vegetable farming. They use the canal water for farming. So all your greens and some of the kitchen vegetables are all farmed in that alongside railway track. This happened, now it has come down, but you can still find it here in near Mumbai. And similarly, in Calcutta, they use waste and wastewater for vegetable farming. Although they look very fresh, but you don't know what is the uptake of bacteria and heavy metals from waste. So they started using it, but not necessarily scientific way. But later, some industry started reusing, like textile mills in Bombay is a classical example. They treated wastewater and they reused it in textile mills, within textile mills. Now, this as I told you, it's very common. Now, the Pollution Control Board says you have to treat water, your own wastewater. They have told industries and recycle almost 95% of it. You will be only given 5% of makeup water because you cannot recover nearly 100% of water. Sometimes you can recover 85%, 90%. So they'll say we can only give you makeup water. And in condos, we never accepted ZLD because you don't know where you will treat water and discharge water if you don't have outlet for your treated water. Because you cannot use treated water for anything unless you are able to recycle that water with the disinfection. So, but now ZLD is compulsory in Tamil Nadu and Ganga Belt in some other states. But Tamil Nadu is one of the most stringent application of ZLD. But now I visited quite a few in Ganga Belt. If you go to Ganga Belt, entire Ganga Belt, all industries, particularly pulp and paper, leather, distilleries, they have been all of them have been told to practice ZLD, and each has different ideas because what is distillery waste is different from pulp and paper waste, and leather, textile, all of them have to be dealt differently. So people are using treated water for non-food purposes in some cases, but now in CPCB and some states have come out with certain definition for wastewater, treated wastewater for land use applications. So if you are going to use it on land, then it has to pass certain quality. So your treatment should be for that quality. If you're going to recharge water for the ground recharge, then there is a water quality specification. All these things are coming up slowly because groundwater recharge now is happening everywhere. So the quality, water quality is important. And it's, are we able to recycle water for potable purpose? That's a question which very difficult to answer. You can reuse in commercial building for air conditioners, for toilet flush, garden, all those things. These are very common now. They treat the entire water and they take only fresh water for makeup. And they, most of the new buildings, commercial buildings, I don't know, I'm sure it is in Tamil Nadu also, but in Maharashtra, where I lived for more than 20 years, this is almost compulsory. So, large industrial reuse of sewage. Many people are using sewage treated and then treat their wastewater and mix it as dilution and then meet the discharge norms. So the sewage water is treated by them and they buy treated sewage from corporation. Then they treat their own water, industrial water. For some reason it may not meet the discharge norms, for instance GDS, then they will buy treated wastewater from municipality, mix it up, and now it is being allowed. About 20 years ago this was not allowed and we were strict about it, but now it is allowed in some states, including Tamil Nadu. This is particularly true for landlocked plants where they don't have a discharge facility. As I told you, like if you are located in some plants, if you have a plant near Palar, where will you discharge? Because that Palar doesn't have water. So you have to buy and probably use treated sewage water, dilute it and send it. But all these things require a lot of effort and money. When there is no, either they'll say you do this or you close the plant and go. So that means it's a survival. I have to do it if I have to continue my business. There is no other option. If operating cost goes up, I can tell you it's not cheap. I will tell you later about the cost. And these are all happening today in many states. So sewage mixing with industrial water. And the problem with the sewage mixing is treatment of sewage is not satisfactory still in India. Only 35% of the sewage generated in India is treated. Rest is not. You are using it as a settling tank. Well, sewage comes into some STP. Then it will get settled there and the overflow will go without any treatment, because most of them do not run, or if they have, it's an under capacity. So this is not my data, this is government data. If you go to CPCB website, you will find how much wastewater is generated in India, how much is treated. So that means untreated water goes, and if you are using that water as a treated water, you can imagine your discharging of industrial wastewater after dilution. And that means it's not going to meet the norms. And so the rivers will continue to get polluted. This is the main problem. And you don't get this water from municipality free. You have to pay for it. Although it is still dirty water, you have to pay for it. That is the irony. You don't get this water. You may think, okay, the industry, this municipality is getting rid of its wastewater, so they'll give it free. No, you have to pay for it. And so many industries buy wastewater, municipal sewage water, so-called treated, and then use it for their dilution of their treated water. And so let's look at the terms we use. We are going to use STP. It's just a domestic and municipal sewage black water treatment. Uh, Sometimes it is mixed with the now grey water, so you get grey water and black water, but then you treat it to remove contaminants before it is discharged into public water body. Sometimes it's mixed with runoff, so but it goes into some public water body. That happens everywhere. So you call it sewage treatment plant. ETP is an effluent treatment plant that is mainly for any individual industry. For instance, I may have a large textile mill and or refinery in Manali. I'll have my own ETP. So because I deal with uh, refinery oil, therefore I know how to treat that. So I will treat it and then I may reuse it or I discharge it into public water body. And I have to treat that water, industrial wastewater, for a certain quality before I discharge, or I can reuse. And even for reuse, there are standards available. CETP is that there are conglomeration of small clusters of small scale industries or medium scale industries. They can't afford to put their own ETP. So then ETP is generally for large industries, and CETP is for small and medium enterprises, SMEs. They will say, oh, we can't afford to have our own treatment. We can do some preliminary treatment, but not to meet the discharge norms. So for that, government comes with a plant called CETP. There are many common effluent treatment plants, and in CETPs you have two kinds. One is homogeneous CETP and heterogeneous CETP. Homogeneous CETP means like leather clusters, leather industries together, textile industries together, chemical industries together. They are all homogeneous because they all have more or less similar products and characteristics in their wastewater. Classical example for CETP is tanneries and textiles because they are usually in clusters, like tanneries in Ranipet, textiles in near Coimbatore and Karur. All these things are textiles. And a heterogeneous is like industrial Sipcot, like Kadalur. But there will be pharmaceuticals, there will be other industries and soft drink. That means their wastewater is not as straightforward as homogeneous wastewater. So they have to take multiple steps to make sure that water is discharged is, if you have dairy, it will have a lot of weight, fat in it. If you have pharmaceutical, the pharmaceuticals are very, very recalcitrant. That means you cannot degrade them so easily. So the heterogeneous CETP is much more difficult to handle than homogeneous CETP, and all these things can be designed. Then we have physical characteristics of wastewater for norms. But unfortunately, all these things are there. But color becomes the most important thing for society. If they see any colored water, they'll say it's polluted. And it is not really true because even if you have a dye in the limited quantity, acceptable quantity, it will have color. It doesn't mean it's polluted. But that is the way it is now, color. Whereas I can understand about chemicals. There are certain chemicals. Today there is a news item. IIT Madras has done a study, and they are saying, a lot of pharmaceuticals molecules are found, and these are non-biodegradable molecules, so it's a problem, which is true. Then you have chemical and biological characteristics, and we define that. Now in the chemical, there are many micropollutants which are becoming very important, particularly pesticides, pharmaceuticals thing, and it's not easy. So if you find that you have certain uh, stable molecules, then you have to treat that water with some specific targeted degradation in mind, the design of your ATP. Can we reclaim water for potable use? The problem is uh, we have been doing it without saying it. You know, if you take any water in the river, we are almost reclaiming river water for potable use. But that river, gets polluted by discharge of polluted water or untreated water. But you are drawing water in some other place, thinking it's a good water. So we have. So the major problem is if you want to do that, like this, like some of the countries do, particularly Singapore, you need very good water quality survey. Unfortunately, we do not, although we do surveillance, but we don't do control and punishment. Because, if you go to CPCB website, you will say, oh, this river is polluted. That's it. What are you going to do? They have no money to do it. They'll say you have to, they will only tell that government, you take care of it. That government will say, we'll try to do that. So that's how it goes. I was a board member in CPCB, and I used to find it very hard to understand that people come and pollution control boards come and say, we don't have money to treat our wastewater. We don't have money to treat our waste. So that means, they just use non-availability of fund as an excuse, but government spends a lot of money on this, but it's not still adequate. So we are using uncontrolled reuse. That's what I meant. This won't be possible in US or Europe, but that is because we have limited water control, water quality control, and we have limited resources, and people are happy to get water. Once I had a case to handle. One large industry treated water, they wanted to discharge after a few tens of kilometers of pipeline, and then they found out that at the end of the pipeline there was no water coming. So the pollution control board gave notice to the industry to close it because they are not sending treated water. So if they are not sending treated water, where is it going? So the case, I had to go and inspect it, and when I inspected it, we found all through the way people have broken the pipeline and they are using that water for their use, like washing, including drinking. So that means if you have a pipeline to dispose of, that pipeline doesn't dispose; it gets disposed in between itself. So this is the problem on control, to water quality, and so we reuse in an uncontrolled way. Unfortunately, this happens because of the shortage of water. The environment flow is not there, river flow is contaminated. So in buildings now we are using dual supply systems. You have grey water treatment and then black water treatment. Grey water treatment, you can use it for garden very easily. It's only removal of fat and some dirt and things like that. So whereas grey water, you have to be careful. So the people use and treat it, and then dispose it off. Uh, so if you take any STP or ATP, you will find that they have very common unit operations on the units. They just remove trash, then they remove suspended particles, and then treat it in primary with then aeration, then secondary. Then you'll get sludge. Sludge is treated and dried and disposed of. You can make biogas out of the sludge because it contains a lot of nutrients, and then you can burn and produce power. So basically they have trash particle removal, then primary treatment to say, remove physical removal of materials, then biological treatment for degradation of molecules which are likely to be there, then treat the sludge. So this is the step you will have. And people, you have to treat this with different kinds of, I told you, depending on what it contains, what wastewater contains. It can contain heavy metal, it can contain inorganics like salts, sodium chloride, sodium, calcium sulfate, and things like that, like magnesium sulfate. So suspended solids, particulates, nutrients, priority pollutants. So you have to treat your water according to what it contains. And then wastewater contains three types of things. So you have a physical unit operation, which is removed for all particulate removal by settling, flocculation, sedimentation, and filtration. Then you have a chemical unit operation that using certain chemicals you facilitate the removal of this oxidation, reduction, precipitation, coagulation, and all that. Then you have a third one, biological unit process, to remove biological active compounds. And then you also do that for sludge. So basically this is a screening, the water as it enters the ATP or STP, all the solids are removed using a screen. So all the solids are removed because these can hinder the further processing. So you have to remove this, and there are many methods of screening, but one such screen I've shown. This is the most common one. Then you have larger particles removed. Once you have removed that screen, then larger particles are removed in grid chambers. It could be plastic bottle, so things like that, and you capture them and remove it. And there are many mechanisms to do that. And so this is called grid chamber. So immediately following this screen, grid chamber comes. Then if you want to treat some wastewater with fat and grease, like oil industry or even municipal sewage contains a lot of fat, and so you have to remove them because they are in suspension. So you have to treat them in oil remover depending on the content of the wastewater, and this can be done through a filtration mechanism, and then you remove fat and grease. When it comes to ATP or STP, first thing they do is flow equalization. That means that is because the effluent quality or contamination will not be uniform all day long. It can be very high during the early morning because people are bathing, people are using toilets and things like that. So in order to equalize, you have a equalization tank. So it is kind of a buffer. So the water comes in, stays for a period, and sometimes you provide aeration because it also treats water, but this water is drawn for further treatment so that your ATP or STP is not subjected to any shock, concentration shock or temperature shock, or any characteristic shock for the treatment. Otherwise, depending on the day and the rainy season and things like that, the characteristics will vary, just to avoid that. And it's also used, suppose the ETP is not working for some reason, then equalization tank becomes a storage, temporary storage. So it has a multi-purpose. Then you have, depending on what kind of wastewater you are dealing with, you will be also involved in neutralization, because you have to maintain pH close to 6.5 to 9, depending on the ETP. So you can either, if it is too much of acidic, you add alkali. If it is too alkaline, you add acid. So you maintain neutralization. So this is possible, and it is being done mostly in industrial ETP. Then you have you can have oxidation reduction, in the process. So people will use, depending on wastewater, hypochlorite, hydrogen peroxide, ozone, chlorine. I'm sorry, there is a spelling mistake. Chlorine, oxygen, and all that. So these are mostly for wastewater treatment, industrial wastewater treatment. But sometimes we have handled many cases where domestic wastewater is mixed with industrial wastewater. So even in STP, these things happen. For instance, where small-scale industries are located, like Hindi, you can have domestic sewage mixed with industrial wastewater, because they have their own treatment, but invariably on the peripheral, they can get mixed. So you need chemical treatment also. Primary treatment is simply a sedimentation, physical process. It's a sedimentation. Just allow the water to go through a tank, and then the heavier particles tend to settle, and you do it. In some places, you can have paddles which will move at a very, very slow RPM. You can hardly see the movement of the paddle. So it just settles down at the bottom, and then you remove the sludge from the bottom. So this is the primary treatment. Then, or in some places, you have a flotation system, like a froth flotation. You allow air, and then the particle tends to, particularly oil lickings and lighter particles, they can get lifted up in flotation, and then you skim it on the top, so that the particle is removed on the top of the surface of the vessel, or you can apply vacuum in some cases. So you suck it and remove the particles. And there are certain promoters to flocculation and sedimentation. Dissolved air flotation. This is another method which is used for flotation. This provides oxygen as well as to make the particle. So you have a combination of chemical treatment and physical treatment in dissolved air flotation system. So it has a combination. So these things depend where you require, particularly for certain contaminants and industrial activities, not necessarily for all. Precipitation, this is very common in all STP and ATP, because you add some flocculants and slow mix them, and so that you can make the chemicals into a coagulated manner, remove the contaminants, suspended matter through this flocculation system. So this is almost there in all treatment plants. Then you have a secondary treatment, which is a biological. There are many types of biological treatment plants, reactors, bioreactors, and each bioreactor have, they have, each has its own advantages and disadvantages. And if you go to one supplier of SBR, you'll say, oh, I can do all the operation in one reactor. Another fellow will say, oh, membrane bioreactor, that is the best for this. So each has its own advantages, but it's not one size fits all. So you have to decide, depending on the industrial character, the wastewater characteristics, you have to decide which is the best one, and take choose the appropriate one. But secondary treatment is important, and because without biological treatment, you cannot get wastewater the desired characteristics of purity. So you have to treat water with oxygen, because you will be supplying air you will be supplying air through supplying oxygen through air. But in some cases, we supply pure oxygen. In one case, I've seen they're supplying ozone because their BO2 level is so high, they are not able to maintain dissolved oxygen to that extent. So they are supplying ozone, which is oxidizing as well as supply of oxygen. So these are all possible depending on the intensity of pollution and the characteristics of the water. Yeah, it's basically converting organic matter into CO2 and ammonia. So you will get a lot of ammoniacal smell when you go around secondary treatment. This is a big problem because it's not allowed. So you have to be careful about ammonia evolution in that area. So there are methods of suppressing it. Extended aeration is another, it's just one of the extension of the biological systems. So these are available. There are many vendors. For everything there are many vendors. So it's not a problem. The problem is how to put them all together is a big technology. The vendors will be there for aeration systems, for tank building, stirring, oxygen, ozone generation, in situ ozone. You will get that in situ, but putting them together is very difficult engineering. So you need a good contractor for that. And this is a secondary treatment. Biological treatment. You can treat that. You have to make sure that many places they don't provide enough aeration, therefore it doesn't get reduced. BOD doesn't come down. And this is a major problem because the more aeration and stirring you give, it consumes so much electricity. In order to conserve that electricity bill, they'll only put 1 or 2 stirrers. And other stirrers, there could be 16. A classical example is STP near Mumbai Airport. When you are landing in Mumbai Airport, there is a huge STP. You will find there are about 16 stirrers, but only 2 will be operating. That means they are using rest of it as a settling tank. So when you don't supply oxygen, the secondary treatment is not good enough. Fixed fill systems. That means your microorganisms are fixed on certain materials like rocks, plastics, and then you are using for treatment. And then there are like this is a trickling filter system where you have a fixed, it is the even rocks are used or bed. So you are able to treat that water because microorganisms are on the solids and they slowly get released and you are able to treat the water and take the sludge at the bottom. So these are pretty common old type systems. Even today you can find it in many industries. And this is very popular, moving bed biofuel reactor, MBBR. So this, the biological system is not fixed to a place, whereas it can be in a leaf form or it's all embedded on a plastic floating around all over the tank, and they are providing the microorganisms. And so this is very common in large scale secondary biological treatment, MBBR, pretty common. I told you sequential batch reactor is one reactor does all the things in sequential way, so you are able to save space, but it's quite difficult to manage. Although it is easy to say, but to do all these cycle in one vessel in a cyclic manner requires a lot of planning and control, but it is still being used. Lagoon system, for instance, this was used in distilleries and sugar. You just put it on a large area tank, and then it may have its own aeration, and so it gets oxidized, and then there is an overflow. So it has a large HRT, residence time. Then you provide some aeration, and then because it's open to atmosphere, water gets treated, and then water gets treated, and then you get overflow. You will find this, but it's not very effective. It can be misused. I have seen many plants where very poor treatment, of the water, but when they have enough water for dilution, like pepper plants in Kerala. Now, Kerala has plenty of water, so they use lagoons, open lagoons, treat the water, and then it's not reused, but it goes back to water body. And when you ask them whether it is polluting, they say we are measuring concentration upstream, discharge point, and downstream. We are not able to find any difference. Therefore, it seems to be working. So that's the way it's, because they have large water flow for dilution with high dilution potential. When you have no dilution potential, then you cannot use it. A lagoon cannot be used where there is a shortage of water for dilution. Tertiary treatment is what is critical for wastewater treatment. Harvesting water means tertiary treatment. And the tertiary treatment is advanced treatments where you are able to treat it to the extent so that you can use it for land application or recycle the water. So let's concentrate on tertiary. The media filter, you can remove particulates and even some organic matter through particulate multimedia filter, including carbon, activated carbon, sand, and things like that can remove. And you have to flush it periodically to make sure that it doesn't get clogged. So this is very common in industrial wastewater treatment, multimedia, particularly for oils and fats. then you can have a fixed bed carbon absorption. As I told you, if you have to treat organic contaminants, then activated carbon is one of the best methods, and it can remove uh, VOCs and organic molecules, and you can uh, get good removal of organic molecules. Biological treatment, I told you, this is mainly for sludge treatment, etc. This is being used in plants where they have huge sludge and you have a problem of sludge disposal. So if you have that, then because today any chemical factory, sludge from any chemical factory is treated as hazardous waste. That means you have to dispose this sludge in a TSDF, secured landfill. It is very expensive, and in Tamil Nadu there is only Gundi Pundi. That means you have to transport it and send it to that. So instead of that, if you have a sludge, biological sludge, if you treat it in your own place to produce power, and you get the amount of water, the solid to be disposed will become very, very low. So this is a very good method for that. We have many methods of advanced. What I talk now is a normal tertiary treatment, but now let's concentrate on advanced tertiary treatment. This with advanced tertiary treatment, like membrane application, you can recycle water. This is the most common advanced tertiary treatment in India, particularly in Tamil Nadu. But if you are having a more tedious, total dissolved solids like sodium chloride and sodium sulfate, then this poses another challenge, because membrane can only filter water, but then you get reject. What do you do with the reject? You cannot dispose of the reject. So that means it still requires recovery of water and separation of dissolved solid through multiple effect evaporation. So I'll talk about that. Then you have chemical disinfection like chlorination, ozonation, H2O2, hydrogen peroxide. Now we have UV treatment. So there are plants with the UV treatment so that it gets disinfected. You don't add any chemical. And there were, I've seen many phytoremediation, but these are mainly for use rather than not for recycle. So I'm not going to touch much on that. But you can aquifer recharge is allowed, provided you have treated your water to the quality of aquifer recharge. So this is, but we are not going to talk about it because deal with this in this talk, because we are only considering recycling of water. Membrane separation is the most important thing. See, invariably you will be dealing with both ultrafiltration and reverse osmosis. Ultrafiltration is a pre-treatment before RO treatment. Ultrafiltration will remove suspended macromolecules and suspended solids, but it will not remove water and salt. It will permeate. The permeate will still contain salts, and you will get water. There is no loss of water in it. In the process, you get concentrated this thing, and you would have removed any molecule, large molecules, and suspended solid. This is important. Otherwise, RO system will get clogged. Its functioning will become a problem, and it will require much higher pressure than what it normally, and its efficiency will be poor. So ultrafiltration is a must as a pre-treatment before it goes to RO. RO allows only water, and the retentate will contain salt. So this is the main problem. But these are used extensively in zero liquid discharge. For instance, you have RO plants. You can have nanofiltration, similar to ultrafiltration. It's a pre-treatment. Uh, you have to take even when you take sludge. Sludge may contain quite a lot of water. In one of the audits I did, the pollution control board said, "Where is the water going?" Then we did an audit of sludge. Wherever sludge, the sludge can happen in 2-3 places, and if you squeeze that water, you get good quality water. So, sludge dewatering, there are two things why you do dewatering: because you recover water. Second, you are not going to spend money to transport wet water if it contains 30% water. That means you are going to pay for disposal of sludge with 30% water. You are paying for water disposal rather than solid hazardous waste disposal. So sludge dewatering is important. It reduces the sludge transport cost, and it also provides water recovery to some extent. So these are common in industrial plants. Plate and frame, which you are familiar with, the filter press. Then disinfection of water, I told you, we are now using ozone very commonly because chlorine, because of the environmental concerns on chlorinated substances. We are now avoiding chlorine, but we are going more for ozone in CETPs, and in situ ozone generators are available, so you can buy ozone generators and use it. And in some places you have ultraviolet. So industries do face a lot of problem on the zero liquid discharge because you can treat water up to tertiary treatment. Going for zero liquid discharge in industry is not easy because they may have different pollutants and they are not amenable, and then you have to, if it contains TDS, it's the biggest headache. So I'm going to deal with one industrial wastewater where TDS is an issue, that is leather. And Pollution Control Board, Central Pollution Control Board has categorized 17 industries as highly polluting industries. And paper and pulp, fertilizer, dyes and intermediates, and sugar, pulp and paper, petrochemical, and one of them is leather processing, including tannery. So I'm going to talk about tannery as an example for my. So today, problem in India is not all states impose same conditions. Central Pollution Control Board gives guidelines and says you should implement it. But some pollution control boards, they feel that these are too difficult, and therefore they relax. And in some pollution control boards, they don't relax. So there is no uniformity across India. Now we are concentrating mostly on Ganga belt. So if you have a plant in Ganga belt, then your standard, the requirement of treatment will be much higher standard than away from Ganga belt, which is not fair. But that's the way it is today. And therefore, Tamil Nadu is one state where we insist on ZLD. Gujarat, you can dispose of up to 20,000 TDS, you can dispose it on sea. We have not still allowed sea disposal in Tamil Nadu, although we have. But most of the problems occur in landlocked area. For instance, If you have to sea disposal of water from textile industry near Erode or Coimbatore, you have to transport the wastewater nearly about 300 kilometers to dispose it off into sea. So we never allowed that. Whereas in Gujarat, most of the plants are located in few kilometers away, so they allow sea disposal. So rules change. And the Indian economy gets a lot. It's a very big industry. It provides a lot of employment, generates a lot of revenue, foreign revenue. Therefore, the government also looks at leather industry more favorably by providing a lot of incentives and funds. Most of the CETPs in leather sector, um, you know, ZLD is implemented through close cooperation between central government, state government, and the industry. So even the CETPs are provided with some almost 65 to 70, 80% cost of the uh, setting up the plant, CETP, is provided by the government. Only OPEX, you have to operate yourself. But the capital cost is provided, bulk of it is provided by government. And Central Pollution Control Board has given its own charter that you have to do certain things, and which they have done now. And but it's not a law. It's only a charter. So it didn't work well, but it gave some impetus to ZLD. Later, now the ZLD has been made mandatory by the government. So what is zero liquid discharge? Zero liquid discharge is something which we treat water to get almost 90% water back into the system. And this is now practiced almost in all industries in Tamil Nadu, but in northern part of this thing, for instance, in Gujarat, ZLD is not a must because they allow sea discharge. So that means the tertiary treated water is disposed of. Whereas we recover water even through multiple effect evaporation. This is important for where freshwater scarcity is there. Example is Tamil Nadu, because we have real freshwater scarcity and government is struggling to supply for potable purposes. Therefore, they are not able to supply fresh water, river water for industrial use. And agriculture and domestic use is the main problem, main usage. And ZLD is not easy, I keep telling you. You have to use membranes, they get clogged. You have multiple effect evaporators, you are dealing with waste with a lot of salt, so that means corrosion is a major problem in multiple effect evaporator. And you have to produce steam to run the multiple effect evaporator. So all these things cost money. Even OPEX is very expensive. So we will see why. So there are many ETPs and CETPs in India for tannery sector, and you will find that many of them happen to be in Tamil Nadu. So that is because the Tamil Nadu Pollution Control Board is imposing that condition because the government is not able to supply water to the industries, and they have set a limit. This is the main problem. total dissolved solid, TDS. When you get raw effluent, may get even up to 33,000 microgram per liter, but what is allowed is 2,100, and this is the most stringent value in India. You know, that is because we allow this for land applications, and whereas in other states where there is a seed disposal possible, you can go to 20,000. So that's a, you can, if you take care of this, you don't require tertiary treatment, advanced tertiary treatment, you can get rid of it. So level playing is a problem across India, but ZLD is going to be applied over another 10-15 years. ZLD will be applied all over India. Where do the salt come? You know, leather. They use all kinds of salts, but bulk of it sodium chloride and sodium sulfate. So sulfates and chloride are the salts used mainly for preservation. So if you are treating raw leather, raw hides, that means you are likely to use more salt. If you are using treated hide or leather for further processing, then you are likely to get less TDS. So it depends. The industry is treating raw hide or treated, partially treated. So these are all there. And some tanneries will use partially. So their wastewater can be less problematic than raw hides. So this is the plant where I have been involved for quite some time, and I consider this as a model CETP in the whole of India. You can see how neatly it is kept, but what they are treating is dirty water. It looks like an hospital, but then, so this is the oxygen plant, air separation. So they are able to supply for the secondary treatment, biological treatment, oxygen. Air is not adequate. So this is there. In order to have a CETP, you need to build conveyance lines. So they'll have tanneries dispersed all over that area, and you will have one CETP, and you have to convey all these wastewater to this plant. Then you treat water, then you have to return the treated water back to the tanneries, because if they are supplying X million liters, then after treatment I have to return them 0.9, depending on the recovery of water in the CETP. I will return to the same CETP that much water. If I'm giving 100 liters, I may get 90 liters back. So this is the scheme by ZLD. They use water in a diffused way, then it's all wastewater is slightly pre-treated, sent to CETP. CETP takes total responsibility to treat, then send it back to the individuals. But there is a pre-treatment by each tannery, because one of them is chromium recovery. So there is a condition that if you are going to send your water, you should recover your chromium from your wastewater, then send it to me. So each tannery will have its own pre-treatment unit, and basically it is a pre-treating, like we said, remove all the certain chromium is the major part, but then rest of it is treated, and to some extent even solids are removed, bulk solids are removed, so that it doesn't clog the pipeline. See, kilometers and kilometers of pipelines are there, and they go, and pipeline clogging is one of the major problems of CETP, and it goes across public roads, highways. So if suddenly a pipeline gets clogged in a highway, then it's a big problem to rectify. So they have to do a proper, individual tanneries are responsible for pre-treatment before it goes, and it is metered. So they know that they are sending in a month this much water, so they expect back certain quantity of water depending on the recovery. I don't want to go into the details of pre-treatment, but it has its own sludge removal, solid removal, everything what you see in a big one, but in a small way. What can, except for biological and wastewater treatment, tertiary treatment, they do almost everything like primary and secondary before it goes to, but the major primary and secondary is done at CETP. This is the chromium recovery plant. They recover chromium by adding magnesium hydroxide. Then you recover your chromium and reuse it in your own plant. So the bulk of the problem is solved at the pre-treatment. Chromium was the major problem in leather industry, and now chromium recovery and even chromium usage is reduced by biological deharring. So the chromium usage has been reduced and chromium is also recovered. So the chromium pollution has come down significantly because of these two innovations and the CETPs. CETP, I told you, like any ETP, CETP also has primary, secondary, tertiary, then it goes through advanced treatment, ultrafiltration, reverse osmosis, first stage, second stage, then it may have third stage depending on their ambition to recover water. Then you have reject. Reject contains TDS. I told you, the RO can only allow, retain everything except salt and water. So water comes with salt. Salt goes through all the treatment. If you add salt here, it will go through the entire treatment without any removal. Salt doesn't get treated at all by any of the processes. Biological treatment, primary treatment, you cannot remove salt. Salt comes through even RO, and salt can be removed only by multiple effect evaporator, and ultimately recover the salt. And what do we do with the salt is still a challenge. So you have a receiving sump, the collected effluent is transferred, you overflow. This water from overflow is sent to equalization tank. I told you, where you don't want to have any shock to the ETP. Then you have a physical separation using primary treatment. It's just adding some alum and polyelectrolyte to precipitate or percolate solids, remove it, and the solid from this is compressed. You take water, clear water, then you will send this to further treatment. Then some plants have their own secured landfill, so it's a triple lined secure landfill. So this sludge coming from this is allowed, but now in the current regulation this is not allowed. You cannot store your sludge in your own site. You have to send it to TSDF. That cost quite heavy, 3,500 rupees per ton to dispose of sludge. So if you have 1000 K, it's 3.5 rupees per kilo. It's quite a lot of money for industry. Then pre-aeration, and then biological treatment. This is the most difficult part because leather contains a lot of organic molecules, fats, and so this is where you need. And with all conservation of water, by tanneries, the incoming salt concentration has increased and incoming contaminants, particularly BOD and COD, also has gone up. So this is a very, very difficult operation because the traditional biological microorganisms don't work, and so you need much more oxygen. So that's why they, instead of using air, they produce oxygen and use it for biological treatment. Otherwise, traditionally air was used for biological treatment. After secondary, you still have certain, you know, scavengers for removal. Yeah, DM media filter, because we still have certain molecules which suspended particles and organic molecules. So it is a sand and activated glass fiber with certain depths. So you are able to remove solids as well as remove certain organics in this, depending on the quantity. You add this depending on your wastewater. Otherwise, you can bypass this. So you pre-treat with ultrafiltration. You have huge banks of ultrafiltration, and most important thing is maintenance. If you don't maintain it, ultrafiltration backwash should be done periodically. You have to check the pressure build up, all these things. Otherwise, the membrane gets clogged and it will get damaged. They are very expensive, and if it gets damaged, you have to pay for it to replace it. So it's a difficult operation. But you know, it's done now. There are 10 CETPs with ultrafiltration and RO. This is RO. And here I told you, you can get, depending on the ambition of water recovery, you will have low pressure RO, high pressure RO. So low pressure RO can be about 30 bar. Usually you should get about 50% of the water recovered if you're using 30 bar. But then invariably we go for second RO with 60 bar. There you get another 50% of the first reject. That means I can boost it to 75%. 50 on this, 25% less, 75%. Sometimes we do third stage RO. This is 90 plus bar. So these are very high pressure pumps to be used, and the membrane is very high quality because it has to operate at 90 to 100 bar, usually about 95 bar. Here you get another 25% of the water. That means I can boost the wastewater recovery to about 85%. It also increases the TDS, because now as you keep on recovering water, TDS keeps on increasing. So my TDS now has gone up. In a way it's good, because then my steam requirement for evaporation in the final treatment comes down significantly. The higher the salt concentration, the lower the steam consumption. I'm sure you all have learned about multiple effect evaporation in your courses, you know. But what you learn in your BTech or MTech is highly simplified multiple effect evaporation. But what you learn in a book, you never see in the industry. I have worked with sugar a lot, Maharashtra, and now in CETP, you will find that what we learned is too simplified multiple effect evaporation. We assume equal areas and pressure distribution in a sequence. So higher pressure, highest here and the lowest there, and then you supply connected to vacuum. So the pressure gradient is there, so the flow is automatic. You don't need to pump water, the transfer water, the one from one to the second to third, and fourth at the end. But this is simple design. But in real design, if you take sugar, they are never equal area. There could be 6 effect, 7 effect evaporator, and each will have its own area, A1, A2, A3, A4, A5. But in your, if you go to Faust or Kern textbook, you will find design for equal areas only. You will not find design for unequal areas. That is because industry wants to have as much flexibility as possible. So they will have very high area in the beginning and lower area at the end. And all evaporators are interconnected. So today I could be operating this as my number 1 first effect and this as 2. Tomorrow I will do this as first effect, this as 2, this as 3. So all these things are flexibility is possible by interconnecting pipelines. Depending on how I connect the effects, I can make this as first effect and this as third effect, or any way I want. Therefore, the designs are very complicated. They use flexibility, they operate with the experience, and sometimes in some plants, like wastewater, not all of them are just simple evaporator. They are, because you are dealing with very high scaling material, therefore you have forced circulation, you have a falling film evaporator. So this is a very complicated system design. And please remember, multiple effect evaporator in a chemical engineering unit operation is used for useful products. Now you may use long vertical tube evaporator for juice concentration, milk concentration, falling film, or you will use it in pulp and paper for recovery, soda recovery, things like that. So you will be dealing with valuable product. In effluent treatment, you are dealing with waste. I can't afford to use very capital intensive, but that's what happens. Because you are dealing with very high concentrated, salt concentrated water to the extent of 30 to 60,000 TDS, I have to use very expensive materials and run the unit to get as much water as possible. Usually it is about 7 effect, so that your steam efficiency is reasonably high. Your cost per boiler is low. So you concentrate in a multiple effect evaporator. But sometimes they use, I've seen some plants, particularly in textiles, mechanical vapor recompression and thermal vapor recompression. Mechanical vapor recompression uses a compressor, but actually it's a fan, very low delta P. So you run the unit with very low delta P and recompress the steam coming from first effect and put it back into that. I'll show you the plan. TVR is by by using high pressure steam, motive steam, you can recompress the evaporated water and put it back into the system. So this way I can reduce the fresh steam requirement, but then in mechanical vapor compression you need power, in thermal vapor compression you need high pressure motive steam. So both have disadvantages, but it improves the steam economy very well. So this is with thermal vapor compression. the steam coming from second effect is you are putting steam here, then vapor goes into second one. The vapor from this is compressed, and part of it is recycled, but part of it is taken and use motive steam, high pressure steam, to compress through a ejector, and then you recycle that one. So you are maintaining steam by recompression. So this is the steam requirement mainly. Instead of putting steam directly to first effect, I put it to as a motive steam. So I need, if I have to compress, I need at least 10 bar steam, preferably 20 bar, so that my compression is more efficient, but my steam efficiency increases, and I can reduce the number of effects. So the effects also get reduced later. So this is one possibility, and this is very common in India because you don't require electric power, you require only motive steam. Mechanical vapor compression is you get the steam, and then you take that steam and compress it through mechanical vapor recompression fan. I call it fan because it's only few millibar delta P, and then you put it back into the evaporator. This is usually done on a single effect. That means I do it on a large evaporator, take the steam, compress it. You require a power to run this compressor, put it back. So then you can take the concentrator, periodically you remove the concentrate and send it to crystallizer. This is also possible, but I can tell you, you are dealing with highly corrosive water, so the fan gets corroded very easily. So it requires very high maintenance, and I don't generally recommend the MVR, but there are plants where you don't deal with the highly concentrated thing, you can go for MVR. But if you are dealing with high TDS, it's still a lot of risk involved in the maintenance. So these are being used in everywhere. Then you recover salt. The salt quantity being stored in a typical CETP, today they are storing something like 30,000 tons of salt. This is like a football ground, huge football ground. You recover salt. It's a mixed salt. It has no value today because you are mixing sodium sulfate and sodium chloride together in the wastewater. It comes in there together, and you are recovering. Water is recovered. You have solved the problem water, but salt still. So they are struggling to find a way how to get pure salt, at least pure sodium chloride or at least pure sodium sulfate. So there are attempts now to design your multiple effect evaporator wherein you can in situ separate to some extent sodium sulfate or sodium chloride. So there are attempts now, but still some attempts are going on. They use wood as a boiler for fire. So you get, this is the various stage of wastewater. And what you get finally is like drinking water. You can drink it. People show that they can drink it because it is as good as a bottled water you buy. And that water is stored, and this is the one which gravity goes back to all the individual tanneries. So once water is treated, it's stored in an overhead tank, and then it is sent back to all the tanneries. So you have a lot of cost involved, RO involved. In fact, if you look at it, primary, secondary treatment, they are mandatory. But that constitutes only 75% of the cost. The rest of them constitutes 65% of the cost is for advanced tertiary. And today, you can treat water probably for 100 rupees per meter cube, but if you want to do ZLD, it may be around 800 rupees per meter cube. That means my cost of ZLD is very expensive. So people are struggling to minimize cost. We are working on ways to minimize cost, but particularly minimizing the salt content. CTPs are still struggling, because you still get ammonical, you still get H2S, very corrosive atmosphere in the CTP. Inspired because biological treatment using ozone and all that, the smell is lower, but still people complain of smell. All these things are there. Still, it's a challenge. Ammonia in condensate is an issue. So some people have started using mixing with sewage, but that is allowed in some CETPs. In leather sector, it's very rare, but it is allowed in one or two. Textile CETPs, it's still allowed. I see that. Marine discharge is not feasible in Tamil Nadu because we have to take if you want to take water, treated water from Vellore to Marina or even, you have to go through a huge distance. It's not feasible. It's about 100-kilometer pipeline. We don't recommend pipeline discharge at all because people will simply break it and use that water. Although it will be with high TDS. They don't care. They can use it for washing this, that, and all that. The minimizing the salt is another clean technology option. It costs a lot of, still it's being practiced. They are still struggling to find out what to do with the salt. There is a pressure on them to dispose it off by TSDF, which will cost them a fortune. So it's still an issue to be solved. If you have ideas to work on that, I suggest you start looking at how to purify salt, how to deal with salt in the multiple effect evaporator. Because this design of multiple effect evaporator, I have done quite a bit of research during my early days in sugar. I can tell you, if you have a good package like Chemcad or Aspen, you can do this very easily. But you need a lot of data, industrial data and analysis, because Aspen will give you only solution. It won't tell you what is the concentration of fresh water and what is. You have to provide those information. What are the salts there? Because that will affect the evaporations. And then it is becoming very popular now. I have visited ZLD in pharmaceutical industry, pulp and paper in Ganga Belt, sugar and distilleries in Ganga Belt, tanneries in Tamil Nadu, then textile dyeing in Tamil Nadu I visited, some chemical industry in Ganga Belt I visited. So all these things are being practiced and it's quite challenging. Main problem is tertiary treatment. That's where the challenge comes. As I told you, primary, secondary, it's all more or less the same. Yeah, it is the tertiary, advanced tertiary treatment is the main thing, and it will be made compulsory. You take my word, it will be made compulsory, and all over India, sooner or later. And, tannery in Tamil Nadu is one of the best in India, I would say, in ZLD. A lot of plants are operating. 10 to 12 are operating with ZLD, huge CETPs. They use generator because if power fails, you cannot restart a multiple effect evaporator like that. It requires shutdown procedure because you're dealing with salt. So if it chokes, you have to immediately drain the water and then wash it. Therefore, they prefer to run the unit using even generators instead of going through a very difficult procedure for shutdown, emergency shutdown. I repeat the same thing. One of the ways of doing it, can we separate the sodium chloride and sodium sulfate water? Then it becomes easier to use the recovered salt. But it is a big challenge because it's not added in sequential form. It gets added in different processes. So now people are looking at how to avoid one of the salts. People are managed in textiles because there it is added in only one point, and they now concentrate on sodium chloride. So they are able to do that to some extent in some textiles, but not in leather yet. So evaporation, RO and evaporation, these are the major challenges for the, you should go and see to understand the complexity of their operations. Yeah, so it's still a operational issue. It's important for future ZLD. It's costly, but it will be forced. You cannot get away. You have to do that. But you have to find ways and means of minimizing the cost, and even recovering and reuse of salt will be critical for future. Otherwise, it will become much more expensive. There's a lot of scope for research in this area. Because I've used a lot of proprietary data, information from leather industries, so I thank them. Thank you very much. Yeah. So, if you have interest in environment protection, this is one area I recommend you to work, ZLD. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. It was very informative and very detailed process description that you gave us in this past 2 hours. Participants, if you have any questions, I will unmute you so that you can ask your questions. The participants, if you have any questions, you are welcome to ask sir the questions.
Please feel free to ask. Otherwise, you have a question and answer, test at the end of the day. Raise your hand and then ask your question.
When people don't ask questions, then you normally have two extremes. One, that it was very clear. The other, the other I don't want to really say. So we'll assume that it was so very clear that there was no doubts or no questions that are being raised. And we thank you once again for having accepted our request to give a talk and spending about 4 hours of your very precious time in more than 4 hours. You've talked for 4 hours, so which means by my standards you would have spent at least 24 hours preparing these.
Because I prepared exclusively for this, because I don't give such a technical talk. I give only evaporation, but this is a to Z, so I had to prepare quite a lot. I spent a lot of time.
So you should have spent a lot of time, and I thank you very much once again. Anybody still has any questions, or we can ask Dr. Sukumar Devota to take a break.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.